In the icy darkness beyond Saturn, where sunlight faded into a cold and endless night, the Thalkorin Armada emerged in a shimmer of blue light. 50 capital warships, sleek black hulls etched with runes of conquest rippled into real space. Like predators breaching the ocean's surface. Each ship was a fortress bristling with singularity cannons and kinetic batteries capable of scouring continents bare. From the bridge of the flagship, the Araxo, High Marshal Varuin studied the pale sphere ahead Earth, a world so primitive it had never dared to cross the borders of known civilization. That was about to change. He found the human homeworld underwhelming. Their broadcasts were full of contradiction and noise commerce, politics, music, prayers, threats. A cacophony without discipline. Primitive, emotional, scattered. Exactly the sort of soft target the Empire relished. Soon, this world would be shattered and repurposed, its people reclassified from emerging species to indentured labor. The High Marshal turned to his adjutants, gnarled claws tapping the command dais as he issued instructions. Deploy the infiltration phalanx. Disrupt planetary communications. Begin suppression bombardment of strategic defense nodes. Leave no orbital infrastructure intact. Throughout the bridge, Thalkorin officers in lacquered armor chanted acknowledgments. Their reptilian eyes gleamed in the dark. To them, this was little more than a ceremonial culling, an example to remind the galaxy of the price of defiance. Humanity had refused to surrender when the first Thalkorin envoys made contact generations ago, issuing what the Empire called petulant declaration of sovereignty. It was a curiosity that had delayed conquest, not a deterrent. Now the time for curiosity was over. Below, Earth was unaware of the approaching doom. The first wave of jamming satellites ignited in orbit, and an electromagnetic pulse rolled across. Continents, power grids failed in an instant. Air traffic controllers stared at dead screens. The International Space Station flickered out like a dying candle. And in every major city, the same broadcast repeated in perfect English. We are the Thalkorin Dominion. Your civilization is terminated. Submit, and you will be spared as vassals. Resist, and you will be annihilated. In bunkers and command centers, military leaders tried to rally their forces. Scrambled jets tore across the sky in confusion, pilots shouting into silent radios. Missile batteries powered up, only to fail when their targeting sensors refused to lock. Satellites that had kept the modern world connected now drifted as tumbling wreckage. The High Marshal observed all of this with cold satisfaction. He had watched hundreds of civilizations fall the same way. First, confusion, then terror, then surrender. Yet as his fleet advanced into low orbit, he permitted himself a single moment of curiosity. The ancient records claimed humanity had once built weapons that could crack moons, before their civilization collapsed into endless internal wars. But those were stories, little more than half-mad myths. No species so divided could possibly have retained such power in secret. The concept was almost insulting. Still, even contempt demanded thoroughness. He ordered the sensor arrays to sweep the planet's poles and deep crust. The resulting scans returned with predictable readings: oceans, tectonic plates, ice shelves. Minor anomalies, nothing worth delaying the operation. A subglacial heat signature in Antarctica. An electromagnetic echo beneath the frozen wasteland. His science officers dismissed them as geothermal venting or old Cold War infrastructure. The High Marshal accepted their conclusions without comment. Already focused on the next stage. In the shadow of the Armada, the infiltration phalanx deployed. Thousands of drop pods streaked through the atmosphere, trailing blue fire. Recon craft mapped cities and cataloged population centers. Squads of Thalkorin shock troopers prepared to seize government facilities and secure Earth's most valuable resource, its billions of laborers. The High Marshal knew that by the next rotation, the planet would belong to him. Yet even as he planned his triumph, a subtle, unaccounted-for distortion crept into the fleet's telemetry. For an instant, one of the orbital observation drones detected a pulse in the VLF, very low-frequency spectrum. It was not random noise, nor a broadcast the humans were capable of producing. It was rhythmic, a pattern, almost like a heartbeat. The sensor officer hesitated, squinting at the scrolling data. He began to flag it for analysis when his console abruptly corrected itself, nulling the readings. He frowned, tapping in override commands, but the data vanished as if it had never existed. After a moment's hesitation, he decided not to trouble the High Marshal with trivial irregularities. He had no desire to be accused of paranoia. This was Earth, after all, unremarkable, overpopulated, backward. If the humans still clung to a few old weapons, they would be swept aside like insects. As the Araxal continued its measured descent into low orbit, the High Marshal stood before the viewing canopy, arms folded behind his back. He admired the dawn cresting Earth's limb, a delicate blue horizon brimming with clouds. Beautiful, he thought dispassionately, in the same way a carcass was beautiful to scavengers. He turned away, already envisioning the Empire's glory when he delivered this world in chains. But behind him, in the icebound darkness of Antarctica, a black shape began to stir beneath kilometers of ancient frozen rock. A shape older than any Thalkoran ship. A shape that had waited in silence for a day when it would be needed again. And as the first hairline cracks splintered through the ice cap, the Leviathan's vast systems came online, one by one, awakening to the call humanity itself had forgotten how to make. The Thalkoran thought they knew this world. They thought it was theirs to claim. But already, they had made the first and gravest mistake. They underestimated the one species in the galaxy that had built a war machine designed to survive oblivion and to remember. Asterisk from orbit, Earth looked like it was surrendering. Cities darkened in the aftershock of the electromagnetic pulse, entire continents blinking off the grid. The Thalkoran fleet hung overhead like a constellation of knives, their hulls catching the sunrise. On the flagship Araxo, High Marshal Varuan moved among his officers with the easy arrogance of a predator assured of victory. The first transmissions from planetary governors were already arriving pleas for negotiation, babbled offers of tribute. Predictable. Softness and confusion always preceded capitulation. Yet amid the flurry of reports, small inconsistencies began to accumulate like pebbles collecting at the edge of a dam. The infiltration phalanx had descended in perfect formation. Thousands of pod impacts, clean insertions, almost no resistance, almost. On every continent, a handful of landing zones encountered unexpected countermeasures. In Brazil, a detachment was ambushed by autonomous turrets using munitions far in advance of known Earth arsenals. In northern Russia, an entire platoon vanished into an abandoned missile silo that, by every imperial survey, should have been gutted decades ago. In Central Africa, an orbital recon drone transmitted its last image, a heat bloom under the soil, immense and symmetrical, before its feed went dead. These were oddities. The High Marshal told himself localized pockets of defiance. They did not challenge the outcome. But a trace of annoyance crept into his thoughts as he read the after-action summaries. For every effortless occupation of a city, there was a strange delay or disruption that defied explanation. It was as though Earth itself had become a chessboard with missing squares, pieces they couldn't see. He ordered additional sensor sweeps. The science officers conducted them in silence, exchanging wary glances. The electromagnetic anomalies at the South Pole returned, this time with clearer shape, a hemispheric energy field pulsing in a deliberate rhythm. High Marshal Varuan demanded an explanation. The scientist stammered, citing natural tectonic forces, glacial stress, geothermal venting. Anything to avoid the impossible conclusion. that the readings were technological in origin. Below, the infiltration squads continued their work. In Washington, London, and Beijing, the Thal Corinne paraded through the husks of parliament buildings, broadcasting their declarations of dominion. They herded civilians into containment zones and began cataloging them by genetic profile. The Thal Corinne expected screams, panic, supplication, and they got it. Yet mingled with the terror was something that didn't fit the pattern. In every occupied city, the same whispered rumor was spreading, carried by people who spoke with the certainty of revelation. They've awakened it. No one in the Thal Corinne command hierarchy knew what it was. The phrase came up in every intercepted transmission, sometimes in a dozen languages. When the analysts tried to cross-reference the term, they found only fragments of old conspiracy theories, half-buried myths about a Leviathan, a war engine hidden for generations, a doomsday ship sealed in the ice. Ridiculous, Verruin thought. Humanity was a fractured species clinging to obsolete technology. They could not possibly have hidden such a thing from galactic surveillance. The Empire had tracked their emissions, their progress, their history. If a weapon like that existed, it would have shown itself during the initial orbital assault. And yet, in the command chamber, the High Marshal's thoughts were interrupted by a new transmission. This one had originated from a site deep under Antarctica, routed through a forgotten relay network. A voice, synthesized but unmistakably human, spoke in archaic English. Authentication key accepted. Command priority sequence recognized. Systems awakening. Verruin stared at the holographic waveform, its modulated pulses unlike any Earth signature they had cataloged. The translation filters struggled to parse the command code embedded in the transmission. To the human ear, it might have sounded like a simple status report. To Thal Corinne linguists, it was something else, a linguistic construct designed to function as both language and encryption, a seed unlocking subsystems. Hidden in the Earth itself, the science officers began arguing in hushed tones, trying to dismiss it as a deception. But one look at the energy readout silenced them. The anomalous Antarctic heat signature was growing exponentially. The VLF pulse was intensifying. Subglacial radar painted a shape long symmetrical, the size of a dreadnought. Verruin felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. It was the same sensation a beast might feel when it realized the prey was watching it back. He ordered the entire fleet to reorient toward the pole. Across Earth's sky, the Thal Corinne warships shifted formation, their hulls rotating to track a target that minutes ago they had dismissed as a myth, yet even as the fleet braced for a threat they couldn't define, more unsettling signals reached the Iraq Sol. Ground forces in South America reported that human resistance fighters were coordinating strikes with uncanny precision. Across Eastern Europe, railguns hidden beneath civilian infrastructure fired in synchronized patterns, exploiting gaps in the Thal Corinne sensor net. In Australia, an energy spike briefly eclipsed the power signature of the largest Thal Corinne cruiser, then vanished as if it had never existed. Each of these incidents, by itself, might have been dismissed. Together, they painted a picture of a species not merely resisting, but operating on a strategy centuries in the making. The High Marshal's claws drummed the rail of the command. Dazed, his eyes traced the holographic projection of Earth, zooming in on the Antarctic ice shelf. He watched as fissures widened, steam vented, and the surface bulged upward in a slow-motion eruption. His mouth tasted of metal. He turned to his second-in-command. Prepare all siege-class weaponry. I want that. Sight obliterated before whatever is under the ice achieves operational capacity. The order was relayed across the fleet. Turrets and kinetic cannons reoriented. Energy capacitors wind to full charge. On every ship, targeting solutions converged on the same coordinates. The silent continent, now shrouded in a spreading electromagnetic halo. But even as the guns locked on, Varun's mind was haunted by the same question that had infected his entire staff. If humanity was so weak, why had they buried something so vast, and why had they never once tried to use it? As the first volleys prepared to fire, he looked at the deepening crevasse in the ice and felt, for the first time in his long and brutal career, the leaden certainty that something had gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. The first orbital salvo never reached its target. High above the Antarctic expanse, 50 Thalkoran capital ships unleashed a storm of fire singularity cannons, fusion lances, hypervelocity slugs. The sky over the ice split open, streaked with incandescent trails, brighter than any dawn. The bombardment was so intense that the very air seemed to vaporize. From orbit, the High Marshal watched the continent vanish under a coiling cyclone of superheated vapor, the ice sheet shearing apart under the rain of annihilation. When the atmosphere cleared, nothing moved, no power signature, no VLF heartbeat. Just a molten crater 200 kilometers wide. The command deck exhaled in collective relief. The threat, whatever it had been, was ash. But in that hush, the High Marshal found no comfort. Instinct, honed over decades of conquest, whispered that they were not finished. He ordered new scans, radar, thermal, seismic. The officers moved quickly, eager to confirm victory. For several long minutes, the reports came back exactly as expected. No life signs, no energy discharges, until the deepest seismic probe returned. A reading. Something was moving. Varun bent over the holographic projection. The ocean under the crater was churning as though a mountain were rising from the abyss. The shape was clearer, now a hull, longer than any Earth aircraft carrier, braced by immense struts anchored in the crust itself. He watched, transfixed, as it ascended in defiance of gravity and logic, shedding meltwater and rubble in a slow, unstoppable emergence. It rose past the shattered edge of the crater. What had once been entombed beneath 3 kilometers of ice now loomed in the open air, a vessel the size of a city, its obsidian skin traced with symbols no Thalkoran had ever seen. It did not drift on thrusters or anti-gravity fields. Instead, it simply ascended as though the Earth itself were lifting it skyward, and it was alive. Sensors screamed as a resonance pulse struck the fleet, a low, harmonic note that bypassed shields, passed through armored hulls, and sank into every Thalkoran's bones. Officers clutched their heads as the sound resonated with something primitive in their nervous systems, an echo of dread no language could fully translate. It was not just a ship. It was an artifact built to wage war beyond extinction, a testament to a civilization willing to burn itself to cinders rather than surrender. Earth's first Star Destroyer had awakened. On the bridge of the Araxal, Varun's composure cracked. "Full fleet dispersal," he shouted. "Establish maximum bombardment distance. All batteries fire at will." The fleet broke formation, scattering like startled predators. Weapon ports glowed as they prepared a second bombardment. But before the Thalkoran could release another barrage, the Leviathan moved. A line of blue-white light ignited along its keel, an ancient main cannon that had not fired in centuries. Every sensor array on the flagship went dark as the beam lanced upward, carving through the atmosphere in a column of incandescent plasma. The beam struck the nearest cruiser amidships. For an instant, the ship held together, wrapped in an aura of coruscating energy. Then it split apart, its armor liquefying, internal reactors detonating in a blossom of white fire. Debris fanned out in slow arcs as the Leviathan swung its cannon in a slow, deliberate sweep, drawing a line of ruin through space. 2 more ships fell before the fleet managed to scatter out of its firing arc. In the sudden, ragged silence that followed, the Leviathan's voice boomed across every Thalkoran channel. It spoke in no language they knew, yet every being heard the meaning in their minds. "We are humanity. We remember." In those 5 words, the balance of power shattered. On Earth's surface, human resistance erupted in coordinated uprising. Cell networks, which the Thal Korin believed disabled, sprang back to life, patched through redundant fiber cables and radio relays the aliens hadn't even known existed. Artillery hidden beneath cities unshuttered their silos and began launching precision strikes on Thal Korin landing zones. In South America, a battered human armored brigade received a simple two-word transmission from the Leviathan: "Now advance." They surged forward under the cover of automated drone squadrons that no intelligence report had ever catalogued. In East Asia, entire city blocks unfolded as decoy structures peeled back to reveal mass driver batteries. The Thal Korin had counted on shock and awe, on the paralysis of fear, but fear was gone. In its place, the Leviathan had seeded something more dangerous: hope. On the Araxau, Varun demanded a full power analysis. How had the humans sustained such a colossal weapon? How had they hidden it from galactic sensors? His science officers stammered as they tried to answer. It predates their collapse. Their old civilizations must have sealed it when the last great wars ended. Sir, we believe this ship was never decommissioned. It was entombed, preserved. Varun's mind reeled. Preserved. The implication was staggering. Humanity had survived one apocalypse by hiding a weapon they deemed too dangerous to destroy. They had buried their most terrible invention beneath the ice and waited generations, centuries, for the day it would be needed again. The fleet commander realized, too late, that this was not a simple occupation. It was an unintentional resurrection of a war doctrine that Earth itself had almost forgotten. The Leviathan spoke again, this time in a voice that resonated with every human comlink. Reclamation protocols engaged. Thal Korin forces vacate this world. For the first time in his career, Varun felt a pang of doubt that his forces could win. The humans were not broken primitives. They were a species that had survived their own extinction by planning, by burying their nightmares in the ice. And now that nightmare had awoken. The Leviathan's main cannon retracted into its armored housing, and for one taut instant, the battlefield was silent except for the chorus of failing systems and emergency klaxons aboard the Thal Korin ships. High Marshal Varun clutched the rail at his command dais, his claws cutting furrows into the alloy. A single ship one had crippled nearly a tenth of his fleet with a single sustained volley. His subordinates stood motionless around him, as if hoping that if they simply did nothing, reality might reset to the simpler state of assured victory they had enjoyed hours before. But reality had shifted irrevocably. "Redeploy all squadrons," he snarled. "Prioritize dispersal. Target that weapon platform with all siege artillery. Do not allow it to recharge." The order transmitted across the fleet in seconds. Thal Korin vessels fanned out, taking up staggered attack positions to avoid being lined up for another devastating sweep. Hundreds of kinetic cannons began cycling, targeting matrices aligning on the Leviathan's exposed dorsal hull. And still it did not rise fully from the ice. It waited anchored like some dark relic of Earth's buried wrath, half submerged in the crater, its engines smoldering with a pressure that defied comprehension. On the ground, the ripples of that awakening turned chaos into something worse for the occupiers: coordination. In the North American quarantine zones, where human civilians had been corralled behind portable force fields, the occupation commanders watched in horror as the prisoners surged to their feet in perfect unison. Women, children, elders every one of them tapping the same hidden comm channels, whispering to unseen allies. Moments later, the containment generators failed, their power lines cut by microdrones that had lain dormant under the soil. The humans did not scatter, they advanced as columns, directed by voices from the Leviathan. In minutes, local Thal Korin garrisons were overwhelmed by mobs wielding captured disruptors and improvised weapons. Further south, armored columns that had lain dormant under camouflage nets began to roll. Vast railgun tanks veterans of wars long forgotten crawled out of dry riverbeds where they'd been mothballed generations before. Each one bore the insignia of a human polity that no longer existed, their hulls patched and scarred by time, their reactors humming to life as if they had merely been waiting for the correct command code to come down from the stars. Above them, all the Leviathan pulsed. Its subspace communication arrays, dormant for centuries, synchronized the uprising across continents. Every broadcast had the same chilling final directive: restore the sanctuary, remove the invaders. From orbit, it looked almost choreographed. Resistance fighters and armored spearheads surged forward in expanding wedges, converging on Thal Korin. Landing sites. Anti-orbital rail batteries unfolded in old megacity foundations, lifting massive guns skyward. And while the Thal Korin focused on the Leviathan's main cannon, its secondary weapon systems began to unfurl. A lattice of launch bays opened along its dorsal ridge. Dozens of sleek projectiles erupted from the ship in a staggered launch sequence, trailing plumes of frozen vapor. The High Marshal leaned forward to see the targeting readouts. Missiles? Someone whispered. But these were not missiles. The projectiles dispersed halfway to orbit, splitting into hundreds of smaller drones, each carrying a payload far more precise than a simple explosive. Disruption fields keyed to Thal Korin biosignatures. Aboard the flagship, the first alarms blared as the drones impacted. A low hum filled the corridors, disorienting every officer. The High Marshal's second-in-command collapsed to one knee, clutching his chest as his implants sparked and failed. Half the bridge crew followed suit, screaming as their neural augmentations overloaded. Varun felt it himself, a cold spider of static threading through his skull. He forced himself upright, every instinct screaming that he was witnessing the application of war doctrines so sophisticated that the Empire's analysts would need a generation to understand them. "Shut them out," he bellowed. "Override all sensor relays. Disable external comm feeds." But the damage was done. The Leviathan had not simply attacked their hulls. It had targeted their cognition, severing the bio-digital linkages that made Thal Korin command hierarchy so lethally efficient. In the confusion, the next wave of human counterstrikes erupted. Railgun emplacements hidden in Earth's southern archipelagos began firing in rapid succession. Each slug was the size of a shuttlecraft, sheathed in plasma, moving so fast the air itself ignited in its wake. A half-dozen Thal Korin cruisers vanished in silent, concussive implosions as the rounds punched through their armor and detonated. Deep in their cores, Varun spun to his tactical display, which now glittered with too many hostile icons to track. Human resistance cells were no longer simply fighting for survival. They were executing a prearranged liberation campaign designed to retake Earth the instant any alien invasion forced the Leviathan to reawaken. This was not improvisation. It was a blueprint humanity had hidden under the skin of their civilization, a fallback plan meant to be triggered only when the most final line was crossed. Status of the primary beam? Varun snapped, voice raw. "Still offline," an officer rasped. "It's recharging. But we can't verify its cycle time." "Sir, it could fire again at any," an alert tone cut him off. In the depths of the Leviathan's hull, power was spooling again, a rising thrum so vast the ice crater vibrated in sympathy. Varun's gaze locked on the live feed of the ship's hull as arcs of energy gathered along its superstructure. They had believed the Leviathan would be a single-shot terror, a relic with one good volley in it. They were wrong. This was not an artifact of desperation. It was the embodiment of an idea, humanity's refusal to ever again be enslaved or exterminated. And now that idea was awake and very much alive. The Leviathan's power signature climbed past every known metric, flooding orbital sensors with surges that overloaded entire arrays. Even shielded instruments aboard the RXO began to flicker with static. From space, the ship looked like a wound in the earth itself, a continent-sized shadow framed in lightning. Varun knew in his marrow that his fleet could not endure a second full barrage. Desperation lent him clarity. Consolidate our forces. He ordered, voice stripped of any pretense of composure. All capital ships form a perimeter. Prepare to deploy the Null Tesseract. At those words, the command deck went still. Officers turned as one, dread writ across their faces. The Null Tesseract was the Empire's last resort weapon, an artificial singularity meant to consume an entire battlespace, no matter the collateral losses. Deploying it above a planet was forbidden by 10,000 accords. Varun didn't care. This is no longer a conquest, he said, low and savage. It is a containment. We will erase that thing from reality before it can rally the rest of their kind. He input the final authorization code himself. Across the fleet, a single black capsule, ejected from a dreadnought's ventral hold. It tumbled end over end as its internal containment fields collapsed, building toward an event horizon no technology could reverse. But the Leviathan did not react. Its great cannon remained dormant, its hull silent, instead an array of projection. Nodes along its flanks lit up, firing pulses skyward in a geometric pattern. On every Thal-Koran screen, a wireframe image flickered into existence, a schematic of something vast and complex. Varun stared. The hologram resolved into a shape he had seen only in the most ancient archives. A human arcship, the progenitor. Vessels that once ferried humanity to distant worlds during their first diaspora. Those ships were legends long thought lost to history. Impossible, breathed the science officer beside him, but the Leviathan's broadcast was not finished. As the projection spun, dozens of smaller nodes flared to life around the Earth's orbit. One after another, hidden transponders that the Thal-Koran had never detected began to answer the Leviathan's signal. First tens, then hundreds, a coordinated beacon array, each point a relic of the Arcship era. Still functional, still slave to the Leviathan's command protocols. This world is under protection of the first. Exodus. The voice echoed across every channel. Resonant and ancient. The Leviathan was not just a single dreadnought. It was the keystone of a defense network buried so deep the Thal-Koran intelligence apparatus had never suspected it. Somewhere behind Earth's moon, an orbital shadow detached itself from the regolith. The Thal-Koran had believed it was just another abandoned mining station. But as it moved, the true scale became clear. Kilometers of armored plating, bristling with weapon arrays that no human power signature had ever revealed. A second Leviathan dot, and then a third. Varun felt the last threads of certainty slipping through his claws. They had come expecting a world too fractured to fight, too primitive to understand orbital warfare. Instead, they had triggered a premeditated resurrection of humanity's oldest war doctrine, Arc Defense Protocol. His tactical officer's voice quavered. Sir, if these ships are fully operational, the Null Tesseract may be. Deploy it now. Varun roared. The Singularity capsule reached critical mass. Space around it began to shimmer, warping in on itself. Any lesser opponent would have had no time to react, but the Leviathan did not simply sit idle. A harmonic resonance pulse burst from its flanks, rippling out in perfect concentric waves. As the Singularity formed, the pulse struck it. Every Thal-Koran sensor went dark. In that blind instant, reality convulsed. The Tesseract's event horizon didn't expand, it imploded, folded in on itself as if some hidden failsafe had been triggered. The Singularity vanished, leaving nothing but a vacuum ripple and a sphere of ionized gas. Varun's mind reeled. They had spent centuries perfecting singularity warfare. How could a species humans claim to have forgotten their own golden age, dismantle it so precisely? The Leviathan's answer came in a single phrase, transmitted on every frequency at once. We remember everything. On the ground, the resistance roared. Broadcasts of the failed singularity detonated across human networks, proof that Earth's old gods were not only awake, but more cunning than the Thal Korin could ever have imagined. In Europe, resistance forces rallied around their shattered cities, newly emboldened. Anti-orbital silos began launching scramblers designed to blind Thal Korin satellites. In Asia, 1 million humans who had hidden in sublevels for months surged to the surface with stockpiled weapons. Everywhere, humanity rose as one, and still, the Leviathan's ancient cannon had not fired again. It didn't need to. The mere knowledge of what it could do, and what it was willing to do, had undone the Thal Korin chain of command more effectively than any bombardment. For the first time in the Empire's history, an entire invasion armada was paralyzed. Not by the destruction they suffered, but by the certainty that they could never truly win. Varun tried to speak, but no order came. His officers stared at him, awaiting direction. His mind whispered the truth he dared not say. They had not simply attacked a planet. They had declared war on a species that had learned to bury its greatest weapons in plain sight, trusting that one day they would be needed again. His dreadnought's long-range scanners showed more arc ships stirring from their tombs around Earth's orbital plane. Each one sent the same final transmission. You will leave this place. 1,000 years of Thal Korin supremacy were ending in a single day. And in every heart aboard that fleet, the same realization took root. They had awakened, not just a war machine, but the will of a civilization that refused ever to bow again. The first arc ship rose fully into sunlight. The moon's pale dust fell away in cascading sheets, revealing armor older than most Thal Korin dynasties. 1,000 gun ports irised open, each one locking on a separate target. The new Leviathan spoke in a voice that reverberated through hulls and bones alike. This is the final warning. Depart or be erased. No reply came. Varun's jaw worked soundlessly as he tried to form a command. But no strategy survived contact with a legend come alive. Every doctrine, every assumption, every simulation collapsed under the Leviathan's shadow. Below, the Earth's surface had become a vast web of uprising. Columns of resistance fighters, once ragged militias, now moved in perfect sync. Human mechs, dormant for centuries, crashed through Thal Korin landing zones, smashing siege crawlers to ruin. Railguns hidden in old subterranean silos pulsed with devastating accuracy. Varun saw the inevitable outcome unfolding like a prophecy. They were being dissected by an enemy who had written the manual on total war, and then hidden the manual under layers of civilian life, so no invader would ever see it coming. Sir, the tactical officer croaked, the third Leviathan is powering weapons. Its reactor output exceeds our entire fleet. The words were almost drowned by the sirens wailing through every ship. Even the dreadnoughts fortresses meant to conquer star systems trembled as they tried to reposition. Varun knew they could not outrun this. The Empire had never prepared for a retreat under such conditions. The psychological fracture had already begun. Ship captains sending panicked queries, gunnery crews refusing to fire, data officers simply locking their consoles and weeping in place. The Leviathan's dorsal cannon ignited in a blazing pillar of coronal fire. The human resistance on the ground erupted in cheers so loud they bled into Thal Korin cum channels. Even from orbit, the voice of Earth itself seemed to roar defiance. And in that final instant before the cannon discharged, Varun understood something that would haunt him to the end of his days. The humans were not merely defending themselves, they were proving a point. The cannon's beam tore the heavens apart. A single Thal Korin battleship nearly 10 kilometers long vanished in a column of incandescent plasma. Its shields buckled in a heartbeat, hull disintegrating into atoms. The shockwave struck the nearest cruisers, crushing them against each other like toys. Every Thalkoran warship reeling in the blast radius fell from formation. Across the fleet, hundreds of smaller craft began spiraling out of control. Systems overloaded. Crews screamed. Still, the Leviathan did not relent. The Arkship behind it fired a salvo of kinetic penetrators, each round accelerating to a small fraction of light speed. They didn't explode. They didn't need to. One moment, a Thalkoran carrier was intact. The next it was bifurcated, both halves drifting apart in slow, surreal arcs. Below the devastation, Earth's resistance advanced unopposed. Mechs scaled the hulls of grounded enemy ships, prying open airlocks with plasma torches. In shattered cities, human strike teams breached Thalkoran command bunkers, capturing officers too stunned to resist. It was not merely a rout. It was a demonstration. No force in the galaxy would ever again mistake Earth's quiet for weakness. VARU unclutched the railing. All vessels, he rasped into the cum. Prepare emergency withdrawal. 1,000 overlapping cries of disbelief flooded the channel. A high marshal had never ordered a full retreat. It was the ultimate dishonor. But no dishonor could match the certainty of death that now loomed. The Leviathan's cannon began to recharge again, energy gathering in a column so vast it glared brighter than the dawn. Around it, the other Arkships lifted into high orbit, their weapon arrays flexing and aligning in perfect, implacable choreography. Humanity's final war doctrine was unfolding. Drive the invaders into open space, then annihilate them in totality. Varuan forced the override codes past the crew's mutinous confusion. His flagship shuddered as its sublight engines fired at maximum thrust. One by one, other surviving ships followed, the remnants of the once proud invasion armada fleeing Earth's gravity well at a ragged formation. The Thalkoran had conquered 100 worlds, extinguished dozens of civilizations. Yet here, they were reduced to prey. As the fleet limped for deep space, Varuan dared to look back. The Leviathan hung in orbit like a judgment-given form. For a heartbeat, he almost imagined it was watching him personally, measuring him, recording every second of their defeat, so it would be preserved in whatever vault held the memories of old Earth. The tactical readout showed that the Arkships weren't pursuing. They didn't have to. Humanity had already won utterly and forever. On the ground, resistance fighters planted banners in the wreckage. Civilians emerged from hiding, gathering in crowds around the shattered Thalkoran garrisons. Voices rose in hymns no alien could translate, songs about sacrifice, survival, and the promise that Earth would always be theirs. The Arkship's final transmission, carried across all frequencies, echoing to every ship in the retreating fleet. Go. Tell them what you saw here. Tell them Earth is not to be taken. Varuan's vision blurred. There were no words left, no arguments, no pride. Only the memory of a species that had learned to forge its nightmares into weapons and to bury those weapons in the very bones of their world. In that last moment, before his flagship jumped to FTL, he knew the Thalkoran Empire would never recover. They had not merely lost a battle, they had witnessed the reawakening of something no empire could ever truly suppress: humanity's refusal to kneel. The wreckage of the Thalkoran fleet still glowed like a drifting graveyard above Earth. Hull fragments the size of mountains tumbled in slow orbits. Superheated gas vented from ruptured reactors, a drifting aurora of defeated ambition. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Empire had been driven back, shattered in full view of the stars. On the ground, dawn broke over a transformed world. In the city that had once been called Geneva, human survivors emerged from underground bunkers. They walked out beneath the colossal silhouettes of the Leviathans, no longer hidden, no longer silent. Children pointed skyward, their small voices ringing through the air in awe. An elderly woman knelt in the street and pressed her palm to the cracked pavement. She had lived her entire life hearing that Earth was doomed, that the Empire's hunger would one day consume everything her ancestors had built. Now she could feel the thrumming hum of the Arcships overhead like the heartbeat of a god returned. All around her, people began to gather. Some carried rifles, others medical packs, others nothing but weary determination. But there was no more fear. Above, the Leviathan's deep voice rolled across every device, every speaker, every battered unit. Humanity, you endure. Always endured. In every language, the same message repeated. Old tongues, new dialects, hybrid pigeons. The Arcships knew them all. They had been built to preserve everything humanity was: memory, culture, defiance. We have waited. We have watched. We have kept faith with you. Tears ran down the woman's face. She was not alone. Throughout the planet, the transmission became a benediction. Soldiers stood atop captured Valkorin tanks. Doctors carried stretchers into makeshift field hospitals. Children clung to their parents as the last Thalkorin. Prisoners were rounded up and disarmed. The Leviathan spoke once more. This planet remains free. Its people remain unbroken. Remember this day, and be ready. Should they return, we will stand again. In orbit, the surviving Arcships began their slow procession back toward their hidden vaults. They did not linger to take tribute or install puppet rulers. They did not broadcast threats. They simply withdrew into the black, their mission complete. Their departure did not feel like abandonment. It felt like a vow. In the silent command deck of the Thalkorin flagship limping home, Veruin collapsed into his chair. All around him, his officers stared hollow-eyed at the readouts. None dared to speak. Every calculation, every doctrine, every cultural conceit that had told them humanity was a soft target lay in ruin. When at last he keyed the record system, his voice was a rasp. Begin transmission to the High Conclave. A pause. Report. The invasion has failed. Total casualties, uncounted. Fleet strength, negligible. Strategic position, unrecoverable. He swallowed, feeling the burn of his own shame. But that is not why I record this, not only for the record of our defeat. His clawed fingers trembled against the console. We did not understand these creatures. We believed them divided, forgetful, consumed by internal conflict. We believed them incapable of coordinated defense. We believed their history was only stories and superstition. A long silence fell. We were wrong. He lifted his gaze to the viewport, where the blue curve of Earth still gleamed. They remember everything. They prepare for everything. They suffer, yes, but they do not break. They build weapons that slumber for millennia. They embed memories so deep no conqueror can erase them. And when the day comes, they rise together. Veruin's voice dropped to a whisper. They are not like US. They never were. He ended the log. For a moment, he simply sat there, feeling the enormity of it. A civilization that had outweighed every empire, every would-be conqueror. A world that had learned patience as a weapon. On Earth, the celebrations began in earnest. Flags were raised over the smoking wreckage. Memorials to the fallen were built in the first warm light of victory. Survivors painted murals on ruined wall scenes of the Leviathan's awakening, of human soldiers standing side by side with farmers and scientists, of children peering up at the colossal dreadnoughts that had become their protectors. In broadcast centers across the globe, voices spoke with one purpose. This is not the end. The Thalkorin will come again, or some other empire will rise in their place, but Earth will never be taken unawares again. Across human space, outposts that had long felt abandoned received their own messages from the Arcships, encrypted communiques with schematics, defensive protocols, and long-forgotten alliances rekindled. From Luna to Mars, from Europa's hidden oceans to the mining colonies on Titan, humanity's scattered children felt something unthinkable, hope. And a deeper, fiercer knowledge that they belonged to a lineage no force in the stars could ever truly conquer. As the Leviathans sank once more into their orbital catacombs, the last message pulsed across the void. We will watch, we will remember, we will return if called. The sky fell silent, but the legend had already taken root. In the coming decades, songs would be sung of the day the first Star Destroyer awakened. Children would dream of joining the ranks of those who stood unafraid. And the Thalkoran Empire, once supreme, once unquestioned, would be forced to reckon with the terrible, inexhaustible spirit of the species they had tried to break. And so Earth became more than a place. It became a warning. Never mistake silence for surrender. Never mistake division for weakness. Because humanity always remember.